Hello, my name is Myia Toney. It is April 16th, 2024. I am here with Colleen Sonosky, a graduate of Trinity, and this is the Trinity Oral HerStory project. So, first question is, when and where were you born?
I was actually born right over at Washington Hospital Center, very close to Trinity.
Oh,
So yes, I am. I grew up though in Alexandria, Virginia. My parents lived in in Fairlington at the time, but then bought a house in a newly developed area in Fairfax County. So I've always been from around here.
and what year were you born?
I was born in 1964.
Okay. Okay. So my next question, with that being said, you are a DC metropolitan native. You grew up
Mhm.
your entire life. Can you tell me a little bit about your parents? Did they work inside of the home, outside of the home?
Sure. My mom, and I'm not sure if this gets to questions later, but my mom was from Worcester, Massachusetts, and came to DC to go to Trinity College in the 1950s. My dad was from Minnesota and came to Georgetown Law School. And in those days in the mid to late 50s, Trinity women were sometimes set up with Georgetown law students. So my parents were set up on for like kind of a group outing, and they met. They were not paired with each other for the outing, but ended up meeting at the outing, and ended up falling in love and got married, and neither one of them wanted to go back to Massachusetts or Minnesota, and they stayed here.
That's good to know. That's good. So they both had jobs outside of the home.
So, and then my mom was worked as a social worker after Trinity when we were very young, but when um, she had four kids in the space of 5 years, she did not work out of the home at that point. But then did some, as we were growing up, did some work in the community and with different churches. And my dad was a lawyer in DC. He first worked on Capitol Hill, and then he worked for a law firm that's now known as Hogan Lovells, but at the time was a pretty DC based firm called Hogan and Hartson.
That's good to know. That's nice to know. Okay. So next question is, what do you remember about your home that you were raised in growing up?
Well, it was in, kind of Fairfax County near Mount Vernon, Virginia. We were I still have friends who live next door to the house that we grew up in, so I do have lots of memories from there. My we lived there till I think the year after I graduated from Trinity, and then my parents actually moved to the house across the street. So we very much stayed in the same area. So it was, kind of a 1950s, 1960s, suburban model home. I first went to a parochial grade school in Old Town Alexandria, but then when I was in fourth grade, we all left the parochial school system and went to school in public schools in Fairfax County. We were very involved with our parish growing up, which was Good Shepherd Catholic Church. my brother and I still go there to this day. So, we have some deep roots in, where we grew up.
Amazing. So you just did a perfect segue into my next question. How would you describe your childhood and teenage years prior to attending Trinity?
I would say, I was a teenager kind of in the late 70s, early 80s, loved music, loved watching, the soap operas like General Hospital and All My Children and One Life to Live. I actually would walk home from high school to make sure that I saw, to be able to watch General Hospital every day. Had lots of my friendships were from church. I was chairperson of the youth group, so was always involved in like donut sales and ski trips and beach trips, and doing lots of things that would raise money for the youth group. And just I liked high school in a sense, but I kind of always lived to get out of high school, and always wanted to just get to college.
That's good to know. So when you even thought about attending college, did you have any career ambitions? Like what did you want to be when you grew up?
So when I was in high school, I think what I wanted to be was a social worker with the Hispanic community, because I took a lot of Spanish in high school, and even went to Spain the summer in between my junior and senior year of high school. So that was, if I remember correctly, that was kind of my goal at the time.
So my next question is what brought you to Trinity? Was this your first choice in school, or were you between another school, or since you were a legacy student, it was kind of a given?
So I always knew that I wanted to go to Trinity. I also my mom went to Trinity, and then my two older sisters also went to Trinity. So by the time I was a senior in high school and had my two sisters already at Trinity, I knew that that's where I wanted to go. I thought, growing up in Virginia, and you have, lots of other schools like William and Mary and UVA and, those types of schools to think about. And they all just kind of seemed kind of big and impersonal to me. So Trinity was where I always wanted to go.
That's good to know. And you actually answered my next question. Were you the first person in your family to attend college? But you are a legacy student.
I'm a yes.
That's amazing. So, my next question is how well did your high school experience prepare you for Trinity?
My high school experience, I think, it was a big public high school in Virginia. I tried to take kind of honors and AP classes, so I came into Trinity, I think, with some already like college credits in Spanish, if I remember. There are a few classes from high school that I particularly remember, um, in terms of some English and history and some government classes that I kind of my study methods, or kind of how I thought about why I like to learn, continued at Trinity.
That's good to know. So, with that being said, Can you describe your experience at Trinity?
Sure. So I came in so when I came in the fall of 82, my sister Mary was a senior, my sister Ellen was a junior. My sister Mary was also the orientation chair. So like everybody knew her. So that kind of meant that lots of people knew my name too, because I was her little sister. I was very involved in student government from the beginning. I don't know if they still do this, but when I was there, the first elections in a freshman class they called it the freshman four. So I was one of the freshman four. I was then freshman class treasurer. Then I was president of the sophomore and junior class, and I was president of the student body for the student association my senior year. So I was very involved in student government. My major was sociology. I had a minor in political science, and they had just started a concentration in women's studies. So I kind of combined all of those and also took a lot of psychology classes too. So I almost had a minor in psychology, but didn't quite. So I and then, was very involved with student activities, whether it was pub nights or dances or we had class days at the time. So I was kind of always involved in doing stuff with school. I also worked at Trinity. My freshman year job between my freshman and sophomore year was I worked in the admissions office and in the dean of students office. And then the summer in between my sophomore year and junior year, I worked in the dean of students office because one dean of students was leaving and another dean of students was coming in, and I was kind of like, I knew both of them, and so I kind of helped the one exit and helped the one come in, and that was my summer job. So
That's good to know. You were very involved on campus.
I was very involved on campus. Yes, you could say that.
So, my next question for you is, how were race relations at Trinity when you were a student in the 80s?
In the 80s, so when I was on the student senate, there were a couple of things that happened in 83, 84, where the Black Student Alliance Club wanted to have representation on the Senate. And in that time between 83 and 84, and it may have gone into 85, I can't remember. I think the vote was that they were not going to be allowed on the student senate, and I'm pretty positive it was a pretty close vote. And then when I was student body president, the president of the college and the dean of students basically gave me an assignment, if you will, to redo the constitution of the student government and to rethink how the Senate, what the representation was on the Senate. Part of that, I think, was because of the Black Student Alliance vote. We did redo the Constitution and the organization of the Student Senate, with making sure that there was representation on the Student Senate. It was also the beginning of the weekend college community coming into Trinity. So when I was first at Trinity, there wasn't weekend college, but by my junior and senior year, it was very much that was going to become the future of Trinity. So we also made sure that there was representation of the new weekend college students on the student senate. So there was some, I mean, I would call it, there was some tension at the time, but primarily around whether whether there should be representation on the student senate. When I was there, the commuter students were probably more African American, and I would say many of the students that lived on campus were kind of the white Irish Catholic students, if you will. That has changed, that has changed over time. But so does that help a little bit understand?
Yes, you answered my question. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so my next question, while you were attending Trinity, did you have a mentor or a role model?
So I would say probably my Patty Weitzel O'Neill, Susan Farnsworth, and Seton Caneen, who were all, Patty was my sociology professor. Susan Farnsworth was a history professor. Seton Caneen was the campus minister. I was I was so involved in the school. I was close with a lot of people, but they were probably who I talked to the most, either when things were getting, too much, or like there was so much going on. They were probably the people that I talked to the most.
Did were your sisters your role models too?
My sisters and my friends were yeah. I mean, that to me is a given. Sorry, I thought that you were thinking of folks, who I met at Trinity, but yes, my sisters were definitely my role models also.
Okay, so the next question. How did the professors that you meet that looked up to or that you considered a role model, how did they contribute to your academic and maybe your personal growth while attending Trinity?
So I mean, thinking about either what classes to take, definitely, if you are having any friendship problems, like I could talk to any of my professors around that. So there was kind of both a like academic side and a personal side that I think, I don't know if you got that at many colleges. So I would say that I had both, thinking about classes that I wanted to take, things that I wanted to do, whether they were internships, and then also, help with any, friendships, or like, just learning how to live on your own, those kinds of things.
That's good to know. So I know that you graduated in the 80s, which is
long time ago.
Oh yeah, decades ago. But can you tell me if you remember any like historical events that happened during that time that really impacted you?
So I remember the 1984 presidential election when Reagan beat Mondale. I was probably one of the only Democrats on campus that day. And I remember thinking, I want there to be a Democrat in the White House as soon as possible. So it took a number of years to get to 1992 and to get, to get Clinton finally there. But I was there for the presidential election, that inauguration in 1985. It was so cold that day that they had to cancel all the inauguration activities. There was no inauguration outside because it was literally so cold. There was no parade. Yeah. So I will always remember, I'll always remember that. I also was at my internship at the National Organization for Women my senior year when the Challenger blew up. So that, and the teacher from New Hampshire who was in the space shuttle, and so being, it's one of those moments of where were you when? That is definitely one that I remember from Trinity. There was also the series finale of MASH, the series finale of Dallas, all of those things I remember. And then a couple sports things. The Washington Redskins won the Super Bowl that in 83. They also lost a Super Bowl in 84. So there was a lot of fun with sports stuff in DC at the time. Georgetown basketball won the NCAA championship. I think that was 85. So there was always lots of fun things that were happening.
That's good to know. So, my next question is pertaining to your life after Trinity. So,
okay.
After you received your undergraduate degree, what were your next steps after graduation?
So at that point, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to do the social work side, and I knew I wanted to do social policy work and go to law school. And there were, at that point, there were lots of schools that were beginning public policy degree programs. So from the job that I had at Trinity, in the admissions office, the person who was my boss left Trinity and went back to GW. I stayed in touch with him. And during my senior year, I ended up talking with him and ended up getting a job at GW in a health, in the business school at the time. And I was the office manager of a graduate program. But the main reason that I wanted that job was to get tuition benefits for a public policy degree. So I started doing that, and as I was in the public policy degree program, I also then decided that I really just wanted to go to law school. So I worked at GW for 4 years, went to law school to a small school in Boston, which actually was originally a women's only law school. It was originally named Portia, and got my law degree and have been working in health policy. I've never practiced law, but I've worked in the health law and policy field for the last 30 years.
That's good. That's amazing. So, since you worked in the health and policy field, what can you say are some of your professional accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Well, I've worked at George Washington University and did a lot of work in analyzing health reforms in the 1990s. So especially around the Clinton health reform bill, the passage of the Children's Health Insurance Program. And then I worked at some nonprofits, the Children's Defense Fund and March of Dimes. So all of those kind of have led me to where I am today, which is working for DC government and running the children's health component of the Medicaid program. So a lot of the work that I have done has been around kind of what the federal requirements are for state Medicaid programs. So I see it as I'm putting that into practice in DC.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Professional accomplishments aside, what can you say are some of your personal accomplishments that like you're most proud of?
I mean, that's a hard one. I mean, I have lots of friends. I don't really know exactly how best to answer that one. I would say having good friends. I have maintained friendships from people from high school, from Trinity, from law school, from my work, and always like to bring people together.
This might be a question that's you might have to think about too. It's like it's so complex, but what kind of legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I want to be thought of as a good person, somebody who's honest, somebody who stands up for what they believe in, someone who is a good friend. Those are the types of things that I would want to be remembered for.
Back to the topic of Trinity.
Yeah.
As a alumni, what do you think the world needs to know about Trinity?
Well, I always try to think um, of Trinity as a place that was founded for women to get an education because they couldn't go to school at the Catholics, at the Georgetowns, at the Notre Dames, at the other Catholic higher ed institutions. So I always think it's important to know that that's why it was founded. I think that's why it is still here today. And the importance of educating women who didn't have a chance to go anywhere else, I think is also really important.
That's great. So, what is one vital piece of advice you would give to current and future Trinity students like myself?
Piece of advice. So, one thing that I think has always been important is, having not just the education experience in looking for a job, but having real world experience too. I mean, so that was, and so when you do get your degree from Trinity, having a job for a little while before you decide what else you want to do, right? Before you decide, I want to go to law school, or I want to go to medical school, or I want to get an MBA, or I want, something like that. So I would say, thinking about getting real world experience on top of your educational experience and then deciding what you want to do.
That's good advice.
When I went to law school 4 years after Trinity, I saw a huge difference in myself and with the students who came right from undergrad. So that is part of why I've always given that piece of advice to people.
Good. Well, our last question for
Yeah.
you is what do you hope current and future Trinity students will do going forward to preserve the university's legacy?
I think showing great leadership skills. I think women as leaders is, I think that is one of the things that was different about Trinity, is that all of us especially, I know that there are men there now in the graduate programs, but in the undergrad programs, having, all women are, everyone is a leader. And so having the importance of women as leaders is something that I would hope Trinity continues to be known for.